Tuesday's storming of Parliament by protesters marked a horrifying expression of a vote of no confidence in the institution following the passage of the contentious Finance Bill of 2024. The storming of the Houses of Parliament was preceded by a sustained national uproar over the contents of the Finance Bill, with sentiments of the public seemingly falling on deaf ears. So, how will Parliament pick up its own pieces? Olive Barrows interrogates.
It served as a wake-up call for the nation's legislature. Protesting youth breaching Parliament's defences and overrunning its halls in an unprecedented show of rage.
We have never witnessed this sort of revolt since independence.
I want to ask Kenyans not to allow their members of Parliament to go back to Parliament, even myself included. Yesterday, I saw the President reading a statement and his deputy reading a statement a few minutes later. Two statements that seemed to come from different hands of government. It is my considered view that the government has failed in its duties to protect Kenyans.
Their proposals.
The Finance Bill of 2024, a tipping point. The ruling party voting through a piece of legislation that had triggered 3 days of protests.
So we learned that the reason they were not accountable to the public, and they knew what the public mood was because they were bribed. Therefore, these people, they are corrupt, for one, or they are cowards, especially since they all knew the mood of the country. It's not that they didn't know, they knew the mood of the country, and then they go and do something against common sense.
And that's why Kenyans are asking their servants in all arms of state to execute their duties and their mandates and their responsibilities according to the way Kenyans design the Constitution. For instance, the members of Parliament are supposed to be representatives of the people. And so when they go to Parliament, they are supposed to speak for the people and not for any other interest. The people come first. And that's what Kenyans are trying to remind them, that they should not take orders, directions from any other employer other than the people, because the people are sovereign. Article 1 of the Constitution says that.
When the president and his people, for them it is business as usual. You will find crazy expenditure on State House, on the DP, on their spouses. You will find cabinet secretaries and other people flossing because they're wearing shoes costing 200,000 shillings, watches costing 1 million or 2 million or 3 million shillings.
And yet, the very next day,
specific areas across the Gazette notice, what the president has done is to justify the use of lethal force on his own children. As simple as that.
The reason we have the military is to fight an identifiable enemy. Usually a foreign enemy, yeah, but identifiable enemy. So in this case, who is the enemy? Is it our children who are the enemy?
Throughout the debate on the contentious Finance Bill, critics held that Parliament was held hostage by the executive.
Poor Moses Wetangula, how does he convince the public that he is the Parliament, the House of Representatives that he runs has honorable men and women? There is no Parliament that people can talk about. So to be told something went through Parliament, like insulting intelligence, knowing that it is under the thumb, and whatever the president wants, the president gets.
But it's not only the institution of Parliament that was indicted by the protests that rocked the country over the Finance Bill. The National Police Service found itself on the receiving end of repeated admonishments from the people, church, civil society, international organizations and the deputy president over their handling of unarmed protesters. And yet, President Ruto remains oblivious.
So the contradictions within the government increase the distrust of what he says. So in this case, it would appear that the deputy president would sound more credible than the president. Implying what? That the president has a problem with the rule of law.
There are ways of arresting people. Arrest them properly, identify yourselves as policemen, take them to a police station and book them. Not kill, not abduct people, hold them in ungazetted places, do not indicate that they are under arrest, do not book them. The next step could be what? Disappearances or extrajudicial executions. The very same things he said his regime will not do is exactly what he is doing. That when you start using that language of treason, it is very scary.
Given the protests have persisted even after the president withdrew the finance bill, perhaps the question remains, what has fundamentally changed?
Well, he shows that he has a problem facing the reality. And until he faces the reality, that first of all his policies are very unpopular.
Kenya is a democratic country. There's another election in 2027. Unless he wants to say he's giving it up and that he wants to run the country using the military, I don't know what he wants.
Olive Burrows, Citizen TV.